Next, we're going to welcome our speaker, who is a senior SCSP advisor, Rhee.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we are getting to the end of this expo, but hopefully folks have had the chance to go around, see all the booths, see the demos, go to the North Stage. It's been an incredible experience for myself, even being, a small part of this organization. But I hope it's also as you leave or go around and do one last circle that you will have a chance to say thank you to the staff and to everyone who helped put this amazing event together. My name is Rhee. I am currently a senior advisor with SCSP. But the focus of the career talk that I wanted to do today, which I hope is helpful for some of you, is just talk about, I've made a lot of changes and pivots in my career. I imagine some of you might be at that stage as well, or are considering it, or are now inspired maybe by this whole new field to think about how to adapt your career and to keep yourself challenged and make sure that you're learning and you're in a position that is fulfilling and is close to what inspires you and motivates you. But it's hard. So there are a few things that I've had throughout the course of my career, and actually there was a talk I was part of yesterday with a president of a university who was here. And I want to start actually with something he said yesterday that sounds very simple, but I think really is a driver for hopefully helping you find what you might want to do next, or keep doing what you're doing and just be more motivated by it. And that is to be curious. He talked a lot about different inventions and discoveries and breakthroughs that have been done. And a lot of it is not always with the intention, with the final outcome being known of what is kind of the end state or the thing that I'm trying to achieve. A lot of them are serendipitous, but it's because people were curious about certain problems that they saw and chased after it. I would say in my own career, I have technically worked really at 3 organizations. I worked primarily in the US government for a long period, both as a career diplomat first at the State Department. I've also then pivoted to becoming an appointee at one point. I've worked at a place called the Development Finance Corporation, and I've worked in the private sector at a company called the Estee Lauder Companies. But even if you take the State Department, which is where I spent 13 years of my career, I would say I had 10 different jobs when I was at the State Department. And so I was pivoting almost every year, trying to figure out, and I also did a stint on the Hill. I did 2 tours overseas. I did 2 tours at the National Security Council, all kind of following the curiosity I had for different issues. And so I think if you are feeling that motivation, I would encourage you to keep doing it. There may not be a common thread, and that's okay. You end up, I have a strong belief that you end up where you are meant to be, but you have to be open to, understanding your own curiosity about things and knowing why you're curious about those things. I think in the case of technology, it is something that I've come across throughout my career that I think is helpful. It makes you, if you're on the policy side, I think it makes you a better policymaker. If you're a technologist already, I think it makes you better in terms of being able to translate it to external audiences, because just having it in your own field, I think, can only go so far. I worked on nuclear issues for a while in my career, so I learned how nuclear weapons worked. My degree is in international affairs and in government, but it was something that was important for me to learn. I've learned about cybercrime. I worked in the field of international organizations for some period, particularly the UN system. You would think that that's a place where you're mostly thinking about, humanitarian assistance, food security, some of the development-focused pieces. But actually, there's a lot of technical pieces that are covered by these organizations as well, and could very much benefit from folks who have that background. And now, currently working at SCSP and working with all these folks, I'm learning, and where I go next is probably going to be actually more in the nonprofit field, but I want to take all the technology issues that I've learned and be able to apply it, not just by going, being in a tech company itself, but there's so many different applications that everyone's going to have to be aware of. And I think hopefully your takeaway from this conference is no matter what field you are in, even if it's not directly in the tech sector, it's incredibly important to have people who are going to be conversant in what is going on, how it's being applied, what tools are safe, what policies are being developed, and how that's going to apply in your sector. The second kind of piece that I think is incredibly important has been for me in my career is, being able to follow your instincts. And I say that not just about topics, but particularly about people. Follow good people. I pivoted from working on nuclear policy negotiations, ended up in the beauty sector, which was not a straightforward path, but something that I did based on the people I met throughout conversations and conversations and coffees and relationships that I had already developed, and taking a chance on someone that was going to be a good manager and a good boss. That is, I think, in terms of your job satisfaction, your career satisfaction, it will always matter more than just about anything else. And I know it's sometimes a cliche to think that way, but I really would emphasize the bosses I've had have fundamentally shaped my career in ways, and it has made me also put the greater value and emphasis now in developing my own team, which I think is going to be the most important factor for your success wherever you go. And last, and then I'm happy to take any questions about kind of the mechanics of pivoting or how you get to different opportunities. But this is kind of now, it sounds like an older piece of advice, but I'll try to adapt it for the current environment. I used to always tell people to take the pen, and I meant that both literally and metaphorically. The way that I became, one of my tours when I was at the State Department was on working on Iran. And I had the opportunity to write testimony. And I think I'd been in the job for 3 weeks. I'd just come from Afghanistan. Wouldn't have been able to tell you too much about our nuclear posture in our negotiations with Iran, but I was asked to write testimony for the undersecretary. Stayed up very late for about 2 weeks, got it done. Did a decent job. Then they asked me to write something else that the department used when it came to Iran policy. And that helped lead me to an assignment at the National Security Council. It was not something I had planned, but I think when you take the pen, you literally draw people to seeing you as the person to go to. And so from a literal sense, that's the advice I give. But also it's more metaphorical as well, right, in terms of figure out what is the best tool for you. It's not always writing. Maybe you're maybe a great presenter. Maybe you're great at social media. Figure out what is that strength that you have that you feel comfortable leaning into. Everyone has something. For me, it was writing. And you can leverage that and use that as kind of your way to draw, and learn and gather expertise around you to show people what you're made of. And to be able to continue to hone your skills, and to take some power and some, responsibility for what you're going to be focused on. Because if you take that responsibility and you agree to take that pen, then I think it really does put you kind of in the driver's seat in roles, even when you're less senior. I think throughout your career, it is something that I think that kind of volunteer attitude and being able to show and take advantage of those opportunities, I think is something that really helps. And that's something that has gotten me kind of step by step closer to the things that I've always wanted to work on. The reason I say it sounds a little bit like an older piece of advice is now no one writes a lot. I have this, but otherwise, I could just as easily have an iPad with me. I could have had ChatGPT do a lot of this stuff for me today. And so I think, the kind of update I would make for the modern age and for this time now, given the topic of this expo, is now I think what is more valuable is not only you take the act of taking the pen metaphorically, but exercising good judgment. Judgment is not no one is selling judgment out here. But as someone who has done a lot of hiring myself and is going to be leading teams in the future, the thing I will always be assessing people for is what is their judgment on things and what is their approach when it comes to hard decisions that cannot be substituted for by AI. I want people who have the good judgment to know how to use AI as a tool. Of course, that is, at this point, it's like a baseline skill that I think we'll all need to be able to have going forward. But I think more importantly is your judgment across a whole range of issues, people to people, leadership, being able to collaborate. Those are still incredibly relevant skills that I think, and I think the person who is going to be able to show that judgment is the person that's going to continue to stand out in an increasingly crowded and incredibly skilled field, which I'm sure all of you are part of. Happy to talk more about that and get more kind of specific, but maybe I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. Yeah. So the question is, can you talk more about your transition and how to pivot? So I started my career, like I said, the first 10 years or so was in the federal government as a career diplomat. After about 11 years in, I decided that it was time for me to learn a new sector. And I say this to people now, there's not a huge secret in terms of finding the right opportunity for you. I talked to a lot of people. I had a lot of coffees. I had a lot of nice former bosses and mentors who introduced me to people, and it wasn't always with the idea that these people had jobs for me. Actually, it was like I needed to better understand what I was interested in, and so I've tried to follow my instincts after every coffee to say, was that something that I'm actually interested in, or was it just nice to talk to that person and kind of learn their career trajectory, but it's not something that I'm gonna necessarily be inspired to do every day. I think it's really important to try to listen to that voice when you're talking to people who are, I'm sure, spanning a lot of different kinds of trajectories and careers. I made it through kind of two different processes to different jobs, very different. One was kind of a consulting, one of those big consulting firms, and then the other one was Estee Lauder. And the question that helped me probably the most in deciding what I was going to do was, this person said to me, do you want to be on the side of the table that's giving the pitch or the side of the table that's receiving the pitch? And I was like, I want to receive it. I want to be the person to decide. But some people are really talented at business development, so I am not at all saying that is not, but I know that about myself, just as you should, try to decide, like, where do I want to sit at that table? And so that was a helpful question in deciding kind of one of my career pivots. The second big pivot, I would say, was to come actually back to government, which is not something I expected to do. It was as an appointee, which I'd also not been before. It was through a lot of conversations with people I'd formerly worked with, and they asked if I would volunteer on the transition team for the previous administration. And I had no idea actually what that meant, but I was like, sure, I will do it on my own dime, because no one knew who was going to win, right? So you're kind of taking a chance, but I figured, even if he loses, I'll get a chance to see what transition means. And so, again, that was sort of my version of taking the pen that time. And then once they won, I decided it was worth it to come back and serve to government. And now the third pivot is me leaving. I mean, the fortunate thing I say these days is I knew I was done on January 20th, so I could plan accordingly. And so I did that. And I'm currently working a bit with SESP, and I work with a couple other organizations. Something that has interested me this time a lot, and I think this is the way I'm going to go, is in having a lot of conversations again with people, is I've learned that I am not done with like the mission part of my career, and that I think even if you're not in government, I think especially right now we all have to be creative about what service is going to mean for all of us. And if that's something that is something you're interested in, you know, that's something I've explored a lot, you know, whether that's through nonprofits, but in lots of other organizations that need help right now. I want to lead people. You know, it's really hard to manage people. It is the thing that would keep me up at like 4 a.m. being like, how am I going to have this conversation, or how, you know, but it is ultimately also the most rewarding aspect. So those are kind of the things I've been looking for, and I think it's leading me into the nonprofit space. But you know, these are instincts I have right now, and we'll see where it takes me. But you know, I think it is, and I would never. I can't map out my own career. I was just talking, actually, you guys should talk to Ryan too at some point, because we were just talking about his career. He has a degree as an undergrad in youth pastorship, I think, ministry, and then somehow got a PhD in history and is now with SCSP. Like, so everyone has kind of these pivots that they make. I think actually when you talk to people, you'll find out it's more common than you think. And a lot of people don't have the 5-year plan, but that's okay, as long as you're happy with the next step you're taking. All right. Sorry, I'm going to ask. How did I? Sorry?
How can students volunteer
I see. How can students volunteer for SCSP? I may actually turn that question over to some of the SPSP staff who are in the audience and or to the side, including Stephen or Ryan. So maybe the right answer will be, I would encourage you to talk to Ryan afterward. But it's great that you have found SCSP. I mean, there are lots of other organizations, but obviously I'm biased. I think it's a great organization. You know, you have a lot of great staff who have also served in government or have done other things and are now with the common theme that they all recognize how important AI is for our national security, but also for economic growth, for all sorts of things. And so I would highly encourage you to talk to them. They're very friendly, and they've done a great job with this career panel. So, all right. I think, oh yeah, of course. The question was, can I talk a little bit more about DFC? So DFC, it's called the full name, it's a mouthful, is the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation. It was created about 5 years ago now, and it used to be something called the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. So all that to say, it's gone through its own pivot. But it is the development finance arm of the U.S. government. For those who may not be as familiar with development finance, I'll wrap up in a second, it provides loans, loan guarantees, insurance, equity, basically uses finance to help support development projects primarily in developing countries. It's a fantastic agency. It's not that big. It's about 700, now maybe 500 people after the recent changes and cuts. But when I was there as chief of staff, we grew the portfolio from about $30 to $50 billion. And so that's its overall exposure right now for all its projects. In the last full year we were there, we did about $12 billion in new projects. And we work in infrastructure, energy, financial services, health, food security. We had a specific sub-team looking at ICT, and we were just getting into kind of AI and looking at how AI, we have an internal chat, DFC, we called it. We were just getting to the point of kind of hoping to leverage AI more effectively and to invest in AI maybe around the world. But it's for those who care about budget and the foreign affairs, especially what's happening right now, it cannot do what USAID does in many, many ways. It is not that. What it can do is be a cost-effective way to have U.S. government money supporting worthy development projects around the world. So, okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jane. Could everyone please join me in thanking Jane Rhee to the stage?
Thank you.